The solo founder journey is obviously insane, is the very simple way to put it. I was just insanely committed to the idea that the internet was hurtling towards a very negative future, and we, the world, needed to act as fast as possible. Lots of insane stories from those early days where, it's one thing to sort of find the customer, but then figuring out how to do the takedowns. I had to like fly to the YouTube headquarters in Southern California and surprise scare a lawyer and be like, hey, like I've been trying to send you these takedowns. Like, can you, the big corporation that is YouTube/Google, please listen to me.
Alex, thank you for being here. Excited to share more about your journey and your uncommon path to building Outtake.
Yeah, thrilled to be here. Thanks for having me.
Why don't we start off a little bit about your founder journey? You were a triple major, I think, in undergrad way back in the day, and then ultimately went to Palantir and then started a cybersecurity company. Walk us through that journey in terms of what ultimately got you to start Outtake.
Yeah, I think the core principle for me, whenever I'm picking sort of the next chapter of my life, has frankly been curiosity. To your point on the triple major, yeah, I did genetics, economics, public health, a good portion of the computer science minor at Berkeley. And it all came down to, sequentially trying to find the things that I thought were, frankly, just tickling my curiosity. And so as I was graduating, I was frankly graduating with a weird hodgepodge of skills. And I was fortunate enough to end up at a place like Palantir, which really admires weird hodgepodges of skills, because what they see is individuals who might have like unique insights on a lot of different domains just because they're bringing knowledge in from a lot of different domains.
Yeah.
And so I came in as what's known as a deployment strategist. So I was sort of helping build out Palantir at various sort of really important customers.
Okay.
But the real thing that happened is I was also very loud. I was someone that had a lot of opinions on how products should be built.
Okay.
And sometimes it wouldn't move as fast as I wanted. And so I basically over time just moved closer and closer to just building product myself. So I moved over to being what was a forward deployed engineer. Okay. And I'm sure we can have a whole podcast on what forward deployed engineering is, because that's turned into a bit of a meme these days.
Yeah.
For good and bad reasons. And then from there, in fact, I moved from that team over to experimental product, which is building true product, sitting directly beneath the CTO. And so the through line is just constantly asking myself, okay, does this satisfy my sense of curiosity? Am I about to learn something completely novel? And is there a sense of I will be able to have some sort of social purpose in pursuing this domain?
It's amazing. And that domain clearly has turned into building what is Outtake. And maybe share a little bit more about what specifically was that light bulb moment where you were like, aha, this is exactly why I need to build the leading platform for digital trust in the internet in the future.
I think we rewind the clock to around late 2022, and ChatGPT has just been released. And I was in this really fortunate position where I'd been pulling large language models into enterprise customers on the behalf of Palantir already for months.
Yeah.
The thing that stood out to me as someone that had now been working at a place like Palantir, which of course works in many industries, but partially thinks about defense and defense tech, and is of course massively security minded. Frankly, the potential misuse of the technology, right? And of course, there's many ways that was going to manifest as well, but the one that I thought was going to impact maybe the most people was whether we would be able to trust what we see online. Whether, if I, as a average consumer, try to go to my banking portal tomorrow and trust that I'm actually logging into my bank rather than accidentally logging into a credential phishing site. Or when I reach out for customer support, I'm actually calling a number that's real rather than something a scammer is listed to try to intercept me. And these problems had always sort of existed. They'd always been a little bit theoretical though, because they take a lot of effort. Making high fidelity impersonations isn't trivial.
Yeah.
Historically it required, probably pretty solid technical skills, maybe some Photoshop skills. The big moment for me was just sort of A, feeling that exponential and saying, okay, I can kind of feel where this is gonna go. And then B, thinking through some of the downsides of that exponential and reflecting on, all right, what are the sort of really high risk situations that are gonna impact a lot of people, and what can I do about it?
Yeah.
And that really came down to, the internet is gonna rapidly degrade into something that becomes hard to trust. And so building a company that tries to proactively solve that problem is not only good for the world, but potentially really meaningful from a business perspective.
Yeah, that's incredible. And in many ways, that's definitely not common. So it's amazing that it's a beautiful path in terms of understanding that kind of product need, the customer obsession. And what was amazing about Outtake's journey is I think you initially started with protecting brands and protecting individual brands, and then over time evolving to enterprise brands. How did that pull you towards influencing and now protecting the most influential brands of today's world?
Yeah, I think it really came down to this thesis of how do we find patient zero for this impending impersonation plague that's about to hit the internet. And for us, our bet was the first sort of individuals or enterprises to really feel this pain were going to be, it had to be a situation where there was a lot of content, image, video, audio available about sort of the target. And if you think about it, it'd be very clear that maybe YouTube creators, content creators generally, because they're so sort of online, would be some of the first folks to be impersonated. And so our theory here was, what if we go and protect these individuals? And one of the secret sauces that we learned on the Palantir experimental product team was the thing you want to optimize for is fast feedback loops. And so not only did we feel like this was the first set of appropriate customers, but we also felt like it was the set of customers that was going to give us really fast feedback cycles. And so what we ended up doing was identifying, a core set of about 2 to 3 YouTube creators, saying, hey, are you actually facing this problem? Like theoretically, we think you would be. Turned out, yes. And so clearly we sort of struck while the iron was hot. And we proactively discovered, rampant scams where these like very famous creators, voices, faces, being misused for all sorts of situations. We had quickly identified not only the attacks, but then we had to go through the interesting process of how do you remediate the attacks? And this starts to touch on an interesting aspect of cyber. We're a cyber company that tries to impact systems you don't control, right? The YouTube creator, ultimately while creating on YouTube, doesn't actually own YouTube or have that strong of an influence over their system. It's not their personal sort of network. And so Outtake had to go proactively discover how to sort of solve external systems as well. And so all that to say, we were able to run through these fairly interesting and difficult technical challenges that we felt would generalize across the market, far from just individuals, across enterprises as well. But we were able to do it really quickly because we got those really fast feedback cycles.
It's amazing. And Alex, speaking of which, you mentioned that Outtake is a product that can't be vibe coded. What does that even mean? And what makes Outtake so special?
Yeah, I think it simply comes down to what actions does your product take, and how difficult are those actions to be replicated by out-of-the-box capabilities from Frontier Labs. The simple answer for Outtake is Outtake not only works on your internal systems, which any good cybersecurity company should do, but Outtake actually proactively reaches out into the world and tries to protect you across third parties. So for example, if a website is impersonating you, a website is actually a surprisingly complicated thing. It is registered on a place like GoDaddy. It is hosted on a place like Cloudflare. It is authored by someone, potentially a bad actor in this case. And so at a minimum, we have 3 external parties with whom we want to interact. It's not sufficient to just sort of send them a notice and say, please stop doing this, especially with sort of the larger sophisticated third parties, like let's say the Cloudflares of the world. You need to really prove your worth. You need to really come in with evidence as to why this attack is actually harmful. In fact, we recently publicly announced one of the latest agents in our fleet, the reconnaissance agent. And the whole goal of that agent is to do the incredibly sophisticated work of a cyber intelligence analyst to go say, not only have I found this, harmful, let's say, domain, I've connected it back to an IP address. I've therefore found other instances of potential attacks. I might have even gone all the way back to figure out who the actual bad actor is. And so when we try to remediate, we come in with these incredible evidence packages. So not only are we serving our mission of providing better digital trust across the internet, we become this incredible counterparty for companies like the platforms or the website infrastructure providers. But all of that is earned. You need to be able to come in with a lot of value to prove that you should be heard when it comes to sort of these remediations. And that simply isn't a thing that gets vibe coded. Rather, that's a thing that is only made possible over time.
Yeah. And one thing to that point, what makes Outtake really special, when we were surveying the landscape, a lot of people that have approached this problem historically have used humans, have used services. And Outtake seems to be the only solution in the market, the leading solution in the market, that really utilizes AI and agents to do this autonomously and continuously.
Right.
How does that work? What's the magic? What's the secret sauce in terms of how you're able to do that, and what makes Outtake so special relative to others?
Yeah, in my opinion, any good founding team should basically become historians of their space. And at least for this first product for Outtake, which historically the industry would call brand protection or digital risk protection, there is maybe graveyard is a strong term. There is a crowd of companies that sort of had mediocre outcomes, largely because they so heavily depended on services, had bad margins, and frankly, ultimately bad services as well. And so to us, it was very clear that while it's easy to sort of juice go-to-market in the early days in this product space by sort of just throwing humans at the problem, it was also a thing that was baking in long-term churn. And frankly, not doing anything different than what's already been done in the last 10 to 15 years in the space. And when we look at how the problem has changed, meaning, we genuinely believe that AI is enabling bad actors to drive impersonation at scale, it seems incredibly naive to copy paste a model that already failed in the last paradigm to a new paradigm. And so it just became obvious to us that we had to be dogmatic, religious about only using agents. Otherwise, we were sort of just gonna sort of zombie walk towards the same negative path. What that means from a technical perspective is actually really powerful. In order to solve that key problem of find the impersonations, you have to go proactively index every mention of your customer. You have to say the company, maybe the top executives, their various products, and you have to have a very strong view of every instance of their sort of public footprint on the internet. Now, on top of this, you have to then refine the data in a format that agents can work on. For us, that basically ends up looking like a really fascinating sort of threat graph. And then of the threats that seem sort of high risk, namely in this case the impersonation threats, we're going to automate the action, which we've discussed earlier is sort of working with external third parties to sort of remediate. The really powerful thing that's actually emerging a lot for Outtake this year is that underlying data asset not only enables this workflow, but now is allowing us to throw down a number of new workflows over the next few months. And so we're starting to really see the benefits, not only in that original workflow of, hey, we're faster, we're better, and higher quality, but we've actually ended up building a platform that enables a ton of other workflows and security.
Yeah, that's incredible. And you're letting your customers in many ways drive your product story. And
that's right.
You're working with some of the most leading companies like OpenAI, Fortescue, AppLovin, but also the Chobanis and Dunkins and Anthropics of the world. And when you think about supporting and servicing the Fortune 500 companies, leading e-commerce brands, to even federal agencies, they're all probably have different needs and different things, but Outtake is already building a multi-product platform.
Yeah.
How does that journey work? Where did you start the initial product? Where is it now? And how do you think about the roadmap for the years ahead?
Yeah, great question. I think multi-product really comes down to exactly what you said. Where is the customer demand? It's also in some ways an imperative in 2026. If you rewind the clock 10 years ago, 2016, going multi-product as a startup was maybe a high-risk gamble. In some ways, one would argue you're dividing focus. But you fast forward to 2026, and if it's true that you've hired a high caliber engineering team, which I can definitively tell you after working on some of the strongest teams at prior companies, Outtake is the strongest team I've ever worked on. And I feel very privileged about that. It's inevitable that this caliber of engineering team, empowered by modern coding capabilities, not only can, but should become multi-product as soon as possible. Now, of course, that needs to be set against what your customers need, and so that's how you decide what you should be expanding into. But I'll give you a few concrete examples. In sort of proactively doing a lot of this impersonation protection work, we were of course protecting executives. And as we were scanning for executives across that public digital footprint, we found not only impersonations, but we actually found threats, right? Some of these executives work at companies that are very much in the public eye, and potentially there are concerns around these execs in a variety of ways. And so we want to proactively find ways to make sure that these folks stay out of harm's way. And we were able to very quickly serve this executive protection need. I'll give you a third example. A a lot of our customers are tech companies. They launch new products all the time. New products are full of flaws. And sometimes these products can be jailbroken in a variety of ways. You might be able to exploit the API to generate things that should not be generated. You might be able to jailbreak that fintech app to maybe extract a few extra dollars that you really shouldn't be. A lot of that sort of is planned, schemed, discussed across, again, that external digital footprint. We are able to listen for that and then extract the insights and pass them back to the right product security org. And so Outtake has found itself, just because we took a very sort of dogmatic agentic approach across indexing and searching across the internet, to now having this sort of platform where going multi-product actually feels trivial to us because of the foundations we built earlier. Yeah.
And what does that tangibly look like? So some of the companies you work with, a lot of founders, when they're trying to think about like multi-product, they know it's important, they understand that, but in many ways, the customer journey for Outtake in terms of how they can use a product is very seamless. And so could you make it a little bit more tangible? Like, what does that look like for a customer, and what are the different products that Outtake sells today?
Yeah, so one of the most powerful things about our go-to-market motion is our ability to provide value with very little integration upfront. Given that our sort of first product SKU really focuses on that external threat surface, we're able to sort of walk in and say, here's a report, here's what we've discovered. We're trying to be good faith partners here, and if that's all you need from us, so be it, right? Hopefully you remember us as someone interesting and intelligent and useful. If you feel like there's something that you want to proactively do about it, we'd love to engage. And that's usually how we show up. That maybe unsurprisingly works quite well. People are always pretty open to having outside folks come in with at least value. Then we run pilots. And in those pilots, we try very hard to convey sort of the actual outcomes. Maybe what has gotten a lot of our customers really excited is that this isn't yet another SaaS tool that requires yet another person to manage the tool, right? The whole point of building an agentic workflow is, hey, we learn what you actually need. We learn it very quickly, and then we set it up. And in many ways, the agent should be able to adapt to your changing needs over time. And so that's sort of how our initial rollouts work. What's happened with expansions over time is, because our sort of deployment team is freed up from just sort of the traditional drudgery of something like a customer success as it maybe existed 5 to 6 years ago, they're a lot more focused on, hey, what are the sort of like crazy new things you guys need, and how can we help you with that? A lot of CISOs enjoy working with us because what ends up happening then is they point us at their next most interesting problem, and then we're able to set up the Outtake platform on sort of these novel spaces. And that's concretely how executive protection or product security also emerged as these like new tiers.
It's incredible, and you build like a really special culture in terms of that. And you talked about a lot about product and engineering being the secret sauce. More recently, new website, new marketing leader, new sales leader.
Right.
It seems like go-to-market's a big focus. Like, what does that look like in terms of your mindset shift, and what does that mean in terms of Outtake's current chapter of the journey?
Yeah, I think we're in this like really exciting phase where I've been trying to like think of the right visual. It's almost like if you're running a little town and the different functions are like different buildings.
Yeah.
And like, a little town probably like, needs like a place of worship, a police department, the mayor's office, whatever. There's all these like different functions, and eventually you have everything that you need for the town. And then you need to make sure that like everything actually runs, right? And it's like a great place to be. We've just reached that stage. Like we have a mature engineering org, sales org, marketing org, et cetera, et cetera. We've like stood up all the functions. I've gone as a founder through the journey of doing each function myself, then hiring the absolute best folks I can to like own the function. And that's exactly what you just mentioned with sort of our fantastic VP of marketing, VP of sales coming in now. And so now the question is, great, how do we make this whole thing hum together? And so the big focus for me as a founder over the next sort of like 6 months is saying, we know how each part of the org sort of succeeds in a silo, but how does it come together to maximize the Outtake as a whole?
Yeah, it's amazing. Well, just the energy of the Outtake office was really palpable when we first met each other. You guys are 5, some people are probably 6 days a week, if not more, in the office, and Williamsburg and Brooklyn. And share a little bit more about that kind of ethos that you've built there and the culture that you built with Outtake, and what do you think makes it so unique and special? Yeah,
I'm a big believer that culture, A, comes from the top, and B, cannot be mandated, right? And so I try very hard to convey the very real sense of excitement I have for the company's future at all times. And it's very clear that a lot of folks believe in that mission. A, they really believe that, hey, we're working on something really important. B, we have a very real shot at improving the future. And C, this is an incredible business. And if you really believe all those things, then you're like, hey, there's an insane opportunity cost for me to not work 6 days a week, right? But importantly, and you can fact check this, hopefully you can just ask the team. I've never said the words, hey, you gotta work insane hours or you gotta show up like this. It's more, I do, and because I'm so excited, and inevitably a lot of the leaders at the company are so excited. And so that culture is infectious, is the way it should really feel. And a big part of that also comes from making sure that people feel like they're owners. I mean, and they are, right? That's the whole benefit of working at a startup is you're early, you have really meaningful equity, and if there's an insane outcome, that's actually yours. We try really hard to make sure people feel like, hey, when the product is down or that button's broken, that's your button, that's your product. Like, it doesn't matter what your role is. This is you, right? Like, this is partially you.
Yeah.
And so instilling that sense of ownership and making it real is sort of how I think we've succeeded in building a pretty awesome culture.
Yeah, it's amazing. I'd love to talk about you a little bit. Like, your journey, we talked about it earlier, has been so special from, the triple major to Palantir to starting Outtake, and your role as a founder has evolved, right? From, to your point, running different parts of the town to now actually helping the town kind of run and operate, to use your metaphor. And so when you think about what that looks like and how your role has evolved as a founder, could you walk us through that a little bit more? Like, what does your day-to-day look like? How does that change relative to what it was like when you first started?
First started version is exactly what we mentioned earlier. It's sort of the figure out the V0 of every function. At this point, it's a lot more about, hey, we've got this fantastic system. Maybe the way that I center myself, because there's a million things you could go do across that system, is just try to identify the 3 bottlenecks to growth and then swarm a lot of my attention and pull in the right resources to make sure that bottleneck gets unlocked. If folks have read, Walter Isaacson's biography of Elon, it's very similar to how he sort of makes sure that, for example, manufacturing gets unblocked at the right places. And maybe surprisingly, that analogy ends up applying really well to early stage companies. And so, for example, for me, we look at 2026, we have incredible product market fit. We win every competitive pilot. Our customers rave about us. It's clear there's massive differentiation. And so then the bottleneck in my mind, at least over the last 4 to 5 months, has really just been, okay, I just need to knock on enough doors. I need enough of the market to know we exist, right? And so the bottleneck is in some sense just the go-to-market engine, maybe more specifically awareness via marketing, and then the sales capacity to go address that awareness, right? And so having identified that bottleneck, then my focus becomes, great, how do I supercharge those functions?
From a founder, there's different parts of the journey that are always challenges when you think about, the challenges that and kind of roadblocks that you face to kind of navigate your uncommon path. What do you think those were and how did you tackle them?
One of the values at Outtake, and this one's very personal for me as well, is when thinking about challenges, you want to lose like a scientist. Like, you want to be incredibly analytical about what went wrong. And this is tough, right? Like, you kind of need to set your ego aside and be like, God, what are all the ways that I totally screwed this up? And how do I make sure that never happens again? And then yet you need to move forward almost with a messiah complex. Like, you need to be like, obviously, inevitably, we're gonna crush this, right? Because in an early stage company, you need a bit of that sort of insane optimism. Inevitably, I'm going to run into, certainly when developing functions that I had less experience with, I ran into all sorts of challenges, right? Maybe there were obvious things that I potentially made mistakes in. But I'm also someone that, every Sunday goes through my entire week and reflects on sort of literally every meeting that I had and sort of every event that happened. And for all the things that I felt like I could have done better, I try to spend a little bit of time thinking, okay, great, what did I learn from that, or how can I not do that again? And that's the lose like a scientist side of it. And frankly, it's exactly doing that, ironically, that gives me the confidence to continue to move forward and say, okay, great, obviously we can figure out the next thing, because look at all the other crazy things we've already figured out.
Yeah, it's amazing. One thing that I personally love about you is you love life hacks and time hacks and many different amazing habits that you've thought about personally. If you're comfortable sharing, I would love to hear a little bit more about what are the things that you've learned over the years and picked up that you kind of incorporate in your lifestyle as a founder.
I think the biggest thing, so I mentioned the sort of like Sundays for reflection. I think one of the biggest unlocks was just being very opinionated about what my week would look like. So I feel very strongly that, Mondays, and this is not just for me, I've pushed this across the whole team in I think, quite successful ways. Mondays are all about intentional plans. So, okay, what are the like concrete outcomes that we expect to sort of hit by the end of the week? Of course, the week is for execution. And then Fridays are for sort of reviewing, like reality versus the plan, right? And we've instilled this culture across every single team, every single IC now has a version of a Monday plan and a Friday close, which is incredibly powerful, right? You take the cliche question of what did you get done this week? Everyone at Outtake can tell you, and not just for this week, but pretty much every week sort of since they started, which is pretty incredible. Saturdays, I use as sort of what I call as intentional entropy, which is maybe a fun way to say do random things. But I spend a lot of time reading. We talked a lot about curiosity. I think it's really important. It sort of helps you sort of do that really big picture vision and like leap sometimes required as a founder.
Yeah.
And then Sundays are sort of that reflective motion for me where it's okay, I know that we did that big Friday close, but what did that look like across the whole company? So it's not just myself, but all my leaders. And how do I sort of help them get ready for the next week?
Yeah. I'm learning a lot. I'm also seeing the inner scientist and biochem come out of you with all these analogies. I love it. When you think about the journey from here and the path forward, ICONIQ is really privileged to be your partner as part of this journey. Why did you decide to partner with ICONIQ, and how we have helped Outtake over the years?
Yeah, I think the most standout capability of any venture capital firm is their ability to A, give you incredible guidance, and B, open their network. And it was very clear that ICONIQ did that. I think this is maybe the most uncommon part, did that before the investment, which was an incredible signal, right? There's a lot of sort of hot air, false marketing in VC. There's a lot of things said or things done, but very few things done. And ICONIQ, especially yourself, I remember you showed up in our office, you spent some time with the team, maybe most importantly, you proactively made customer introductions, and they were customer introductions that, even though you'd at that point spent very little time with the team, you'd clearly grokked what our business was and where we were going, because the customer introductions were, that ideal customer profile, which was to me a signal, not only do you care, but you actually totally get it as well, right? Which gives us a lot of confidence of like, hey, yeah, this is definitely like someone that we want to partner with. That was really the big unlock. And then, frankly, in most cases, you would expect the average investor to, after having signed the check, been like, okay, good luck, guys. I've done my job. It's almost the exact opposite of what happened. In fact, you've, in ICONIQ broadly, have only leaned in more, whether that's from helping hunt down some of those incredible executives we talked about to run our little town, to working with the portfolio team to consult on how to bring on these executives or source incredible people across the organization, understand what incentives should look like over long periods, and then of course, just a continuous flow of customer introductions. It's been incredibly powerful for us.
Alex, thank you for that. We're thrilled to be your partner, and thank you for the time. It's amazing to hear the journey, the uncommon path that you've built, and definitely will marry that analytical scientist with that unbridled optimism to help us grow and scale together.
Awesome.
Good
Thank you so much.
Yeah.